Let's start out with asking, what integrated marketing questions are we asking now that we didn't ask before? And this is especially important because I'll quote myself on this. Integrated marketing is less about having the easy answers than asking the right questions. And if you start with kind of framing the right questions, I think your marketing plans are better. You have more cohesion across channels. You get less duplication across channels. You can focus on which marketing channels serve which purpose in your marketing plan. But it starts with kind of asking the right questions. So here's the first question. The old way, we would ask this question: how can we lock in our integrated marketing plan for next year? Right? We still do this now, right? We want to kind of lock it in. We want to kind of standardize it. We want to know what we're doing. Those are all good things. We want more certainty than uncertainty. We still do that to a certain extent. But the new way for integrated marketing and integrated marketing planning is we ask this question: how can we adapt our marketing plan to leverage new insights? So I think one of the biggest trends I've seen in the clients that we've worked with, and based on experience with dozens of clients in most major sectors, from some of the Fortune 10 companies that are some of our clients to small fast growing companies. I think there's more opportunity in a marketing plan to build in moments to get insights, get data, and adjust and pivot the plan. Really, when we got started and our agency started in 2012, a lot of the plans we saw were like sort of monolithic. It's set for the year. And I don't care if you learned something that something wasn't working, you like followed it through to the year. Then maybe you did a summary. Then maybe you looked at insights, and then that would impact your plan for the following year. We'll talk more about how to do this in a little bit later, and I'll give you some examples. But much more now, I see small changes, adaptations, pivots. We're trying to have a plan so we have a direction, but we're trying to make course corrections along the way. An example of this is actually, one of our fun campaigns for Milo's Kitchen. One of the things we did was we brought, the first ever food truck for dogs that ever existed. And actually, the surprising thing about this, this was a fun campaign. We brought this food truck to 15 cities around the US. It had media coverage in 75 cities around the US. And here's an example on kind of on a national morning show. But what's interesting about this from a planning and integrated marketing perspective, which was this whole activation came from an insight, right? It actually wasn't part of the original plan. And some of that insight was understanding for this brand how pets are increasingly being treated as an equal member of the family. And as we did some of that work, looking at, if they're equal members of the family, shouldn't they have some things that your other family members would have? And as part of that data research and insights work, and we're a market research agency at Top Data, we do a lot of research because we were doing research on an ongoing basis. So not only is this integrated marketing changes, but this is market research changes, where there's many more opportunities to do pulse research on an ongoing basis, rather than, sort of like the big, huge research for the year, and then you don't do anything more. So one of the outgrowths of data insights came in this, for the target consumer of the brand, an increasing number of folks believing that pets are an equal member of the family. And then two, when we actually tested and focus grouped and tested a few things on social about what people were interested in, there was overwhelming support for this idea that wow, food trucks are a trend. Shouldn't there be food trucks for dogs? And so as a result of that, within the context of this annual plan, we were able to adjust and pivot and actually pull off an activation that was the most successful, part of the marketing plan in the history of that brand. And it was adjusted as we went. So that's something that, in industries like CPG, you're particularly not that fast moving. But because there was this culture built in of we're going to test, learn, gather insights as we go, we're not going to wait till the end. And because we saw an insight that we could capitalize on, that impacted the marketing plan in a way that didn't wait for the next season to take advantage of this opportunity. And Jackson, I don't know if you have any thoughts on this, or if there's any discussion from the group. I'm open to your sort of questions or comments about your plans, but it's to what extent is integrated marketing, set and it doesn't change? Why? Because it's complex. There's many channels when you integrate all those things. And to what extent can you adapt and pivot and evolve? And I know you do that some of it in your work as well, Jackson.
Absolutely. Well, I think it's something that we're seeing with sort of every company that we touch and that we speak with right now, right? Is that as different channels get disrupted, you have to be ready to adapt and frequently ready to adapt very quickly. And it doesn't work to have kind of stodgy and stagnant strategies. And this is something I was
actually during the pandemic, right? Because you assume that the situation in whether that's, health or economy or other factors is one way, and it may change. And so I think in the pandemic, I mean, wouldn't you say it's even more of a premium that you can adapt and sort of flex these plans as needed?
It's absolutely essential. And it's something I was actually asking to our attendees earlier is sort of what aspects of your integrated marketing strategies have you seen disrupted? How have you pivoted? And I'm looking forward to talking more about that.
Okay, so that brings us, that discussion, Jackson and everyone else, to new rule number 1, which is build in opportunities to pivot and optimize your integrated marketing plan. So that's the new rule. And what I would recommend is not so much like we have this plan and like, are we going to suddenly change it? But are there milestones along the way where we kind of look at how we're doing and make course corrections? And if we calendar that, I mean, typically when we're doing these big annual plans, like it's a big master calendar, right? Of how it's an activation, it's both a production schedule and an activation calendar. And so if we build in those moments to kind of like take stock and adjust, and we build in a culture of we're gonna be opportunistic and maximize this plan, I think you're ultimately better off. So that's new rule number 1. Brings us to the next question, the old way. We would ask this question: how do I measure the success of each marketing channel, right? I think most of us who are marketers know that we want measurement, we like measurement. Either we like it or else someone else is asking us for it, right? So someone else, the board, our boss, the CMO is asking for it. So we generally like measurement, the success of each channel. We still do that. But the new way we're asking that is we're asking, how do I integrate insights across all marketing channels? And this is just the trend overall, how, kind of every brand kind of says they're integrated, and usually they're mostly siloed, right? Every agency says, oh yeah, we're really integrated as an agency. Okay, well, usually they're kind of mostly siloed. Why? Why do these silos exist? Silos exist because it's simpler that way, right? It's simpler because it's simpler to kind of define, sort of a domain, define a group that's responsible for that domain. And then as you grow, you sort of stack up these domains and you have these silos. One of the best ways, I think, in integrated marketing to break down the silos is you don't have to do an organizational restructure. You don't have to redo how you approach the briefing process or the RFP, although I have a lot of thoughts on how to do better RFPs. We'll talk about that a little bit. You don't have to do that. Actually, what you do is you simply shift the metrics. And let me give you an example of that, because if you change how people are measured, behavior will follow. So here's an example. I just pulled this from a recent client. And this is looking at a campaign work we were doing across, the main groups were PR in the red or pinkish, salmonish, influencer in green, and digital in blue. And you can see within digital, there was a number of different digital activities, right? Whether that's like kind of social or native ads or search or display plus retargeting. And then you can also see with the influencer campaign, there were different in the green there, like kind of different influencer verticals: lifestyle, mommy, food. And within PR, we were activating across TV, radio, print, online. So essentially broadcast, print, and online. So what is notable about this chart, just a reporting chart, but what is notable is how the metrics are unified across all the different marketing channels and disciplines. We're speaking a common language. And I have found that is one of the easiest things and most impactful things you can do to sort of break down the silos and get everyone pulling in the same direction. So what had to happen to do that? Well, we had to kind of understand within the channels, what are the components of it, right? We had to break down that. We also had to start making things that operate in different names of metrics, different types of things, starting to unify them, right? So you see digital, where we might look at, might be called audience reach on Facebook. For PR and for influencer, we can maybe integrate that together under this kind of like views or views/impressions banner. Essentially, like what is the what is the reach we can have? What is the number of times we can do that reach? But we're kind of unifying all of that so we can see it together. Now, we're also tracking visits. We want to drive people, in this case, to like a website. And what can we do to track that? And how can we source that? We're also looking at engagements overall. So it's not just like showing something to someone like a message, whether that's earned or paid. It's also how are we engaging them? We're also looking at tracking clicks. So, and something like this, that's coordinating reporting across channel, unifying it in a way that everyone can see it, in a way that everyone can see that maybe I don't know, in this plan, influencer is not meant to generate the most impressions, but it's meant to do the most engagements or other part of it. It allows you to get a perspective, and it also allows you to kind of stop using vanity metrics that don't matter in certain disciplines, right? Like influencers' purpose may not be to drive the highest number of impressions. It has a different purpose in the marketing plan. So that brings us to new rule number 2, which is unify metrics across all marketing channels. And if you're doing integrated marketing, which means you're deploying multiple channels, you've got to find a way to make that speak a common language. When you speak a common language, 1, you find that the teams integrate better. 2, you get a better bird's eye perspective about what's going on. And then 3, more insights come from that. You understand what is the purpose of each part of the marketing plan better. And to make a truly world-class integrated marketing plan, what you want to do is you want to be able to not have redundancy or repetitiveness in what you do, but each channel is utilized for the purpose in the marketing plan or campaign that it is best suited for, right? Is this part about driving to awareness? Is this part of the plan driving to consideration in your competitive set? Is this part of the plan driving to purchase? Is this part of the plan driving to great customer experience so that you can get repeat use? Is this part of the plan trying to drive towards loyalty, right? All of that parts, and we described it as the path to purchase. What's that journey to purchase? And the path to passion. What's that part where they become a passionate, loyal advocate for your brand? Each part has a different role to play. And if you want to optimize those roles, one of the best way to do that is to unify the metrics. And Jackson, I don't know if we have any questions or comments there. I know this is easier maybe said than done, but if there's specific questions about metrics that don't match up, I'm happy to answer them. Or if there's different channels that are hard to integrate, sometimes people wonder, well, how do I integrate TV advertising with influencer? For bloggers, those seem like apples and oranges. I'm happy to answer those questions as well.
Sure. Well, I think one of the things that is worth tackling here, Ben, when we're thinking about how different channels play together, is it ever the case, and is it worth considering value that's difficult to track that one discipline can have on another? For example, if you have a big PR campaign and you're getting a lot of eyeballs and you're getting a lot of word of mouth, and then that's translating to a higher conversion rate on an ad, for example. Is it ever the case that you get some synergies that are difficult to track? How do you account for those? How do you plan for those? And how is it that some of these, sometimes more difficult to track or quantify channels can impact the performance of other channels?
Well, no, and it's a great question. What I actually think for annual planning, like let's say the integrated marketing planning that maybe a lot of people in our audience does, I actually think you have to have a measurement and analytics plan for the beginning. So for instance, some of the things you might do with a measurement and analytics plan is you might set up that, okay, if you're going to look at, sort of aided or unaided brand awareness, you would set that as part of the plan so you can measure that change. Like what is the sort of like the brand lift in the consideration set? Or are there other metrics that have to be created so that you specifically for the activation or the campaign or the plan? So for instance, one that we use a lot as a PR agency that I think is not commonly used Lot of like, and I know there's a bunch of comms people here today, which I love comms people. So thank you for coming. I am one myself. But one of the things that you look at in comms or PR is a lot of times you look at like share of voice, right? It's like you got this competitive set. This is the total, like all the sort of conversation in this topical area. What's our piece of the pie? Here's another metric that we love that we've added to more annual planning, which is we actually do share of mind. And what share of mind is, it's not just the share of voice for the overall discussion. Share of mind is, if there's like, let's say, I'll make a round number, 1,000 journalists that influence our perception, to what extent are they aware of our brand? Regardless of what article they publish, to what extent do they have a positive view? We could actually track, of these 1,000, when we started this campaign, we had share of mind of, these 20 or 30 people. And now we've increased share of mind by things we can measure, we can track, to 300 people. It's gone up 10x. So that's one very specific example. But the point I'm trying to make is we will often innovate and create metrics from the beginning. And that should be part of your plan too. How are we going to measure and how are we going to analyze? Not just, typically this is done like, okay, we're going to have quarterly reporting, or we're going to produce this, or we're going to, this is some of the metrics we'll do. But instead, it's like, how do we from the beginning have a much more holistic view of that, and how we make that part of the plan too? Brings us to the next question. The old way is we would ask, how can we best coordinate activities around our paid media spend? Why is that the case? Why is that typically done? Well, because usually that's the biggest part of the budget, right? If like we're a big TV advertiser and that's like, we're spending like, tens of millions of dollars on that campaign, we tend to go where the money goes, right? We're like, let's get that set first, and then let's integrate everything else kind of building off around that. The new way, I would say, is much more of how can we best coordinate activities around our earned media activities rather than the paid media spend. And I think that's just like the rise of earned media in all its forms is being driven by a few things. I think one is that because of some disruption in traditional media, there's a lot more opportunity to use alternate forms of media that might have a different ROI than just a paid spend. Number two, rise of user-generated content, right? User-generated content, or building buzz, or something that trends online, or just discovered on Reddit, or is a trending, hashtag on Twitter. That can't be totally controlled as much and planned for as much in advance. So that's an additional trend that I think is sort of feeling more organization around earned media activities. Three, there's just a lot of, I think, disruption right now in the pandemic. So lots of things where, companies in general being a little bit more conservative on paid media spend, there's been more of an opportunity for sort of earned media activities as well. So I think we've seen a little bit of a shift there as well. And one of the examples I want to give of this is our work for Laffy Taffy, kind of iconic candy brand, has the jokes on every wrapper. But much more of, rather than focusing on what is the paid ads that are going out on behalf of the brand, what is the flighting schedule, and then building everything else off of that. For Laffy Taffy this past year, it was actually all based around a viral marketing campaign that was basically based on kind of a social listening insight that we had gathered, which was that people either love or hate banana flavor Laffy Taffy, right? And to the brand's credit, we sort of presented it as, instead of saying like, oh, just banana tastes great, we should embrace the conflict, right? Who's team banana and who's team no banana? And actually, a lot of the calendar for that brand was actually based around earned media, buzz building, viral activities. We started a rumor that banana flavor was going to get canceled, had that play out on influencer and PR and social and digital. There were paid components that supported that, but it was much more oriented around sort of the earned media viral campaign. So the new rule, and I think you start to see this sort of shift just as like, paid spends and also as, rise of whether that's, different kind of demographic audiences that are a little bit more skeptical about ads. So because of that skepticism, much more desire to sort of like integrate, not interrupt in whatever they're experiencing. So the new rule is develop earned media plans earlier in the process. And for anyone who's a PR or comms person, here's the other thing. This is my experience with annual planning for integrated marketing. And if you have a role in that, I think all too often, and I think this is starting to change. It's like PR or comms or sort of media relations is at the end of that integrated planning process. What it means is like, we come up with the big idea, we come up with the activation, here's what we're gonna do. And then like PR team, can you help us, like, can you put out a press release? Can you help us announce this? What are we doing? We kind of do it at the end. I really think at its best for PR and comms folks, it's bringing that to the beginning of the process, being like, we're experts in how do we message this and communicate this the right way. Let's bring that into the beginning of the process and be stakeholders at the beginning, not just how at the end, how do we announce this thing? And I think more companies are doing that. And as we see a little bit of shift of integrated marketing, that's all built around big TV advertising, that's changing right now. Brings us to the next question. So the old way was we would ask, how can we best summarize our results, right? We've got to produce reports. We've got to, demonstrate what we've learned. We've got to report to the board. We've got to report to, C-suite management team. We try to summarize results in a way that they can understand and make sense. The new way, and we still do that in the old way, but the new way is much more, how can we track and visualize our results? So this kind of shift from post-campaign summaries to ongoing activations, what can we learn and what can we understand? And a great example of that, and this really comes from much more of a growth marketing mindset, comes from a lot of the startup clients that we have. As I mentioned, we have like kind of small, scrappy startups, and we have big, some of the biggest, companies in the world as clients. Well, I think some of the shift that we're seeing is this ongoing tracking and visualization rather than post-event summary. So a great example of that is work we do for Postmates. And what is interesting about Postmates is when we're doing, kind of a PR, social, digital campaign for Postmates, what we're doing is dashboards are being set up. So we know in real time, if we're doing this PR campaign, we drove to this result for, here's an example for Postmates. It was like National Eat What You Want Day. And we were activating on that day. And we had this kind of PR earned media campaign where we're giving away, whatever city each city wants to eat most based on a survey we did. We're going to give it away for free on this one day. We're activating that. We're actually seeing how we're doing in real time. We can track visits to the landing page where you can see this sort of special offer. We can track conversions and clicks off of that landing page. We can track ultimately how many people are going to the app and choosing to, get their Big Mac delivered, which is little tidbit. Generally what people want the most is a Big Mac. So they're getting their Big Mac delivered on that day. So all of that is actually done and set up in much more real time. And that's allowing us as, the PR social digital agency to adjust, to pivot, saying like, oh, wow, this is actually driving a lot of the result. Let's get more in Chicago market, just like that WGN, TV show we placed. Let's look at what is similar things that we can do in that market. So brings us to the new rule, and it's something we love doing. We're often hired Top Data, one of our agencies, to help sort of transform companies to do monitoring more like this or measurement more like this. And that is new rule number 4, strive for real time rather than campaign end reporting. And I think, 5 years from now, 5-10 years from now, I think all of us, because the tools are getting so much more easier, the cost is going down, are going to be doing much more ongoing real-time tracking and visualization rather than campaign and post-mortems of how we did. So that's new rule number 4. And Jackson, maybe I'll just throw it out and see if there's any questions too. What in your experience, what do you think are the biggest challenges with that in terms of real-time versus campaign end, and sort of the desire to get more insights faster, and instead of being perfect, maybe it's like being iterative, right? And that's even on the PR side, right? We're like A/B testing things, we're improving. We don't have to get the perfect pitch at the beginning. We just have to end up there through a process of iteration.
Yeah, definitely. If you're only gathering up all of your insights at the end, the cement is dry. There's not a lot you can do to the money is spent, the campaign is over. There's not a lot you can do to iterate. And I think that it's, this is something that has become increasingly familiar to marketers, right? The idea that you test and then you iterate. And I think it's a familiar concept, but as an industry, it's taken some time to get to a point where we execute well at it. And I think that there's still a lot of unknowns within the industry and a lot of innovation and room for that to happen. And I think that's something I've appreciated about the campaigns we've worked on, Ben, is that I do think that just through doing a lot of these campaigns, there's been some interesting insights that we've come to in terms of real-time information.
And Jackson, here's one other thing I love that Top Data does that I think a lot of people like. I think we're moving towards it, but not a lot of people do it. Is like testing live in the wild on social. What I mean by that is before you even get too far in the campaign, maybe let's like put up 2 versions of the message on social, do a very small ad spend just for testing purposes, right? Not to actually reach anyone, just to test which message resonates more, get insights about that, and then incorporate it like next week into our actual campaign. So what you have to do is it's sort of testing a lot, instead of doing big monolithic market research studies, very expensive, takes a lot of planning, and then just and doing it that way. Now you can do these like little mini tests, particularly using social, because you can really target it. You can spend only a little bit of money and you can get insights from that. So that's one of the things I'm most excited about. And I actually think way more companies, as part of their annual planning inputs, ought to do these like little tests in the wild, quick, scrappy, pulse market research insights. And that's why I love it. That's why we've been kind of shifting Top Data to really be experts at that.
Sure. Well, it's a great way to challenge your thinking, right? You get a bunch of marketers in a room or around a table or on a Zoom call, trying to come up with ideas for their campaign, and it's like, this is a good idea, right? Right? Yeah, it's a good idea. And you get a little bit of an echo chamber, and you all decide it's a good idea, but you haven't ever tested it in the wild. And then you go and spend 15% of your budget chasing that idea before you've tested it. It makes a lot of sense to do those sort of small scale real-time tests.
Right, and you can do that, and if you can set up tracking on an ongoing basis, even better. Brings us to, I guess, the next question, which is the old way. We would ask, how can we communicate our product benefits? Product benefits still count. We like to explain our benefits or our features. Or our advantage over competitors. Still important, but the new way I think that we're seeing in many more integrated marketing plans is we ask the question: how can we fully demonstrate our value proposition? So sort of shifting from product benefits to the value we create. And a really nice example of that to kind of see that and how that impacts your integrated marketing planning. Client of ours called Spinnaker Support. What was interesting about them is that this is like not a very super sexy industry. This is like third-party Oracle and SAP database support. Basically, like you buy a $1 million database, and then you also buy a support contract for it, and you can buy that from Oracle or SAP, or you can buy it from third-party vendors like Spinnaker Support. Well, one of the things when you go into a field like that tends to be more of a commodity industry. You will get if you start communicating product benefits, as we typically would, you would start saying, okay, well, we're lower cost. You have a dedicated support rep assigned to you who knows who you are. You're not just calling a call center. You have many other things that you would kind of do as product benefits. But one of the things when we looked at kind of Spinnaker Support, and this was kind of as an input to their annual marketing plan, was we looked at, well, what are the defining moments? Meaning we talk to different stakeholders. The defining moment is, when does your product or your brand or your company have the highest perceived value? When is your value proposition the highest? So we're not just talking about communicating product benefits. We're talking about how can we communicate value, and to communicate great value, let's go to the moment where like people cannot live without you, where this is great. And so we sort of asked everyone, and we talked to different people and customers and salespeople and stakeholders, when is this point? And for Spinnaker Support, what came out was their highest point of perceived value, their defining moment, as we would call it, is when you have these support ticket queues that you've had for years, when you have these complex databases, and it goes to ticket queue 0. That's like that feeling when like your email inbox goes to 0. Wow, I've got through all of it. And this ticket queue 0 was a defining moment for Spinnaker support. So once we knew that defining moment from a brand positioning perspective, the integrated marketing side of deciding it became really easy because we knew this message would be at the core, and it shifted a lot, right? Instead of being the company that helps you do third-party support cheaper, now it's the company that helps you get to inbox 0 in your ticket queue. And finally, it isn't about time. And all of the marketing and the advertising and the messages and the targeting and the retargeting ads and the earned media PR and all of that flew through it, and it was unified around this defining moment. So I really do think in integrated marketing, understanding what is that defining moment, understanding deeply what is that value proposition you're going to communicate, and then having that ready and going beyond product benefits or features helps make that integrated message more effective, more cohesive. It actually makes the plan something that really gets a lot of people excited about. So brings us to new rule number 5 of integrated marketing and integrated marketing planning, which is build your marketing message around defining moments. What are those defining moments where you have the highest perceived value? When people would gladly recommend you and shout your name from the rooftops? And how do we start building integrated marketing across channels, across platforms to best communicate that message? Brings us to our final question, which is the old way. We would ask, how can we create distinct plans for each geographic market? That could be industry vertical, that could be persona type. Basically, we tend to say, let's make sure we've got a great plan to reach the audiences that count. And in particular, for multinational companies, we saw it was like, okay, here's our, if either it was country specific plan or if it was region, right? It was like, this is our LATAM plan, this is our APAC plan, or so forth. The new way is, how can we unify planning across core and emerging markets? So much more of, how do we unify this as part of a cohesive whole instead of having, I don't know, 38 plans running for 38 different countries at the same time. And one of the things we did, we set up, and I believe in this so much, there needs to be a unified plan that is your plan. You can't have 12 plans because no one's gonna be able to follow it. One of the things we did when we set up Top, and we wanted to say, like, let's become, an agency network. Let's become a global agency, set of agencies in a different sort of way. This is one of the things we looked at, saying that basically there's 2 models for working in sort of cross markets, multinational companies that have audiences all over. One is you go with the large agency model, which is basically you say, like, I'm going to get one massive agency that has a footprint in all these places, and they're going to coordinate the whole thing for me. Problem with that traditionally is that if you have this one massive, let's say, large agency, really, they're not really integrated themselves across all of these markets. They've usually acquired an agency in that market, put their name across it, rebranded it, but it's not integrated at all. Second way to go, see some companies for this issue, is you go with like the local agency model, where you go with, okay, I don't know, there's, we have 27 different markets we're in. Let's get 27 different agencies. Anyone ever tried that? That is a huge coordination problem. Every agency has a different skill set, and it's very hard to manage. So one of the things we've done as part of our agency, but I actually just think this is an approach that more companies need to do, is we basically said, let's operate in between large and local. And let's standardize on a core set of metrics, right? That has to be integrated. Let's do a core set of messaging. Let's do a core set of channels. Let's do this in a universal way. But then let's have that implemented on a local level with people who understand the market and boots on the ground. So one of the unique things about Top is that we're operating actually in 20 plus countries around the world, but we operate as one team. It is not like there's the Shanghai office and then there's the San Francisco office and they're on their own. We actually integrate as one team together, and that's where I think direction overall, just the industry is moving. So new rule number 6, create a unified plan for multiple markets. And And ideally, it's one set of metrics, it's one set of messaging. The tactics can be different, but I think many, many more companies are doing unified plans as opposed to doing like, oh, here's our UK plan, here's our US plan, and all of that. And I think one of the great benefits when you do that, and you're a multinational company, is you get testing and learning and insights from all of those different markets. It makes you better when you get inputs from all of those places, meaning your US plan actually gets better if you have data and inputs that are happening from Australia or UK or Canada. Okay, so before I end with kind of my most important thought of the day, are there questions? Do you have any questions on anything I've mentioned? Now is the time to mention them. I'm happy to answer them for the group. Or I've put on the screen, if you don't want to put your question in front of the group, you can email me, ben.kaplan@topagency.com. So I'm happy to answer your questions. I'm happy to answer if you got projects that you're interested in and potentially us working on, or you got an RFP you want us to submit for, I'm happy to discuss those as well. That's number one. And then Jackson, are there other things in the channel for people to get, like the slides from today, if people want to get our YouTube channel, where can they go for that? We have a new kind of YouTube address that they can go to where we have all of these. Every week I do a new webinar on a new topic. Last week was viral marketing. Today is integrated marketing. Next week is on the new rules of employee engagement for internal. So where can people go to kind of find all that information?
Yeah, absolutely. If you take a look at the chat, I have shared links to request today's slides. I have shared a link to Ben's YouTube channel and LinkedIn. Also, Ben's Twitter handle, where he'd love to hear from you.
Okay, so, and this is my LinkedIn as a little, you take a little picture, that QR code will take you to my LinkedIn page. I don't accept every LinkedIn request, but if you say you read a webinar, then I will. So just say you attended this webinar, let me know. And let me kind of end on kind of the sort of kind of final thoughts on the day and just a little bit kind of more about how to approach things. One big thing, kind of final thought of the way, big takeaway. We've talked about a lot of new rules, but they all kind of ladder to sort of one key point. And just here, I'll go back and just to kind of reiterate this, just from the beginning. We said, you remember, we said new rule. Computer froze a little bit here, but maybe it will catch up. There we go. New rule: build in opportunities to pivot and optimize your plan. Like the era of big monolithic plan that never changed, it really doesn't exist anymore. And so building opportunities, we talked about that. We also talked about unifying metrics across all marketing channels. So one of the best ways to like influence and get things out of silos is to unify all of that. And we gave you an example of like how that looks with a common set of metrics. Third, we talked about developed earned media plans earlier in the process, and the shift from being advertising or TV advertising dominated plans is really shifting. So bringing in earned media in the process, in particular, sort of taking PR or comms from the end of the process to the beginning, going from simply amplification to core messaging. We also talked about striving for real time rather than campaign and reporting, knowing how you're doing on an ongoing basis, and being able to course correct as a result. So we talked about testing in the wild, using social media, using digital. We use small numbers of journalists that we pitch a story to measure their interest, doing all those things in real time. We also talked about building your marketing message around defining moments, getting away from products and features, and that especially true of B2B, and getting into what is the ultimate value and what is our peak value that we add, and starting to shift your messaging around that. And then also, we talked about, finally, about creating a unified plan for multiple markets. Much like not having silos according to marketing channel, getting away from silos based on audience and integrating the whole thing and the benefits that come from that. So where is integrated marketing heading? Heading, my kind of most important point of the day. Integrated marketing is heading to be more nimble and faster. Integrated marketing is heading to become more channel agnostic, so we can substitute channels. Integrated marketing is becoming more kind of measurement and metrics driven, just overall trend as we start kind of moving to more digital type activations. Integrated marketing for your next plan. Here's the final takeaway. You don't have to do this all in 1 year. I know, some people are like, oh man, real-time metrics, how are we gonna get there? So instead, just try to increment. try to make your plan, try to build in a couple check-in points where you can start adjusting and taking stock of how your plan's doing. Start to look at, if you can't do all your metrics in a unified way, start to look at 1 or 2 or 3. If PR tends to be an afterthought in the planning process or earned media, let's just try to get it involved in more of the initial meetings, right? If we still are going to have, a European plan that's different from a US plan, how can we bring across some common elements and have some core pillars that those 2 different plans are based on? And in my opinion, if you can start that process, if you can do it incrementally, typically, maybe many of you come from organizations where there's a lot of stakeholders, there's a lot of people with different opinions. If you can do it more incrementally, ultimately you can create lasting change faster. You can drive more ROI for your integrated marketing plan. And what happens is if you make it 10% more integrated in 2021, and people see that, then 2022 and 2023 gets easier, and you can do this in a multi-stage, multifaceted way. So with that being said, thank you so much for coming. I'll end on just this. Jackson, thank you for hosting. We're a new kind of agency. We're called TOP. It stands for Test, Optimize, and Perform. We're actually a collection of 12 agencies, and we love collecting data, validating data, optimizing data, timing data, integrating data, and scaling data. If we can be a part of your marketing plan, we'd love to be. Even if not, I'd love to be a sounding board. So please reach out. I just want to connect with more people in the field and go out there and create some great plans for the coming year, and let us know if either I personally or us as an agency team can be of help. All right. Thanks so much, everyone. Thanks for attending. Next week, the topic is the new rules of employee engagement. That is one I love. We're going to talk about cultural building too, when everyone's working remote. How can you do it? And talk about a lot of internal comms as well, and how to scale that as well. So thank you for Jackson for hosting. I'm Ben Kaplan, CEO of TOP, and hopefully we'll see you next week. All right. Cheers, everyone. Thank you. Take care.